Welcome to Procedurally Generated, a police procedural podcast. I'm your host, Jermaine Harris. In this episode, I'll discuss the franchise that prompted me to launch this podcast. Blue Bloods is a police procedural that first aired in September of 2010. It's centered around an Irish Catholic family named the Reagans, who's based out of New York City and has a history of working in law enforcement. Essentially, I wanted to discuss this show because of its social commentary, especially in the more recent seasons. As you may expect, the show can be pretty political and is generally pro-cop, which is fine to me as long as you're also holding cops accountable for their actions. But there are times when the main characters seem to not want to face any questioning about how they do things and why they did it. So here's a little bit of background about me and this show. Last year, I started watching the show from season 6. And have got up to, I believe, somewhere in season 11 right now. But the first episode that made me really want to share my thoughts about the show was Handcuffs, which is season 9, episode 9, where there's a video of cops being harassed at a housing complex. Frank, who's the current police commissioner, decided to order a raid to round up anyone at that complex with an outstanding warrant, which in theory may not be bad because if you have an active warrant, you probably need to deal with that. But my issue with this is that it was done in retaliation rather than in the spirit of the law. And I think that the cops that were there in the video didn't do anything wrong. They just decided to not escalate the situation. Of course, people shouldn't be abusing cops, but Frank just didn't want his ego to be hurt, and he didn't want it to look like open season on cops, which I don't think would have happened anyway. I doubt that the kind of people who would actually actively make fun of police in their face would be deterred by that raid. In that same season, episode 14, called My Brother's Keeper, there's an officer who accidentally shot an 11-year-old kid, and when Frank is talking about it, he said something like, "The bullet from the officer's gun struck an 11-year-old kid." He didn't just say the cop shot an 11-year-old kid unintentionally. I highly doubt that non-officers would get that same courtesy. That language just feels too soft, and I think that if someone presented that same language to Frank, he would call that out. There's another example from season 9 in episode 18 where this question of mandatory fitness requirements comes up for cops, and I can't imagine why anybody would be against that. There was a moment where one cop was struggling to run up the stairs to support their partner. I think that there needs to be mandatory annual fitness for all police officers that are actually on the streets for the sake of their safety and their partners, as well as for the sake of us. I'm not saying that all cops have to be Olympic athletes, but there should be some sort of mandatory fitness that they have to meet regularly to make sure that they can handle being on the streets. Otherwise, they should be doing desk duty or something more internal. Again, I am critical of the police, but they do serve an important function in our society. I want police to have everything they need to do their job properly, but I also want police to be held accountable for what they're doing. At the end of the day, I understand that Blue Bloods is just a TV show. It doesn't have to be perfect and nobody expects it to, really. With that said, in real life, I hope that conversations around police reformation can be had with care, love, and trust from all parties, because again, they do provide a useful service, but that's only when it's done right.